The restaurant was quiet that evening, not because the city was asleep, but because the autumn rain had kept most people inside, and only a few souls ventured out for dinner at that hour. Inside the softly lit diner at the corner of the street, the air smelled of roasted coffee, buttered rolls, and the faint sweetness of apple pie resting behind the glass counter. Among the scattered customers was a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, yet with a certain weariness in his eyes, a look that revealed battles fought silently within. He sat alone in the booth near the window, staring at the drops of rain racing down the glass, his untouched steak cooling on the plate in front of him. The waitress, a young woman in her late 20s named Emma, approached with a polite smile, holding her notepad though she already knew he hadn't ordered anything else. "Would you like me to warm that up for you?" she asked softly, her voice carrying both kindness and concern. The man looked at her for a moment, then let out a slow breath, as if deciding whether to keep his secret locked away or to let a stranger in. "No," he said, his tone low but firm. "It won't matter anyway. I don't have much time left." Emma frowned, unsure of what he meant, but before she could ask, he continued, "I only have 1 month to live." She froze, unsure if he was joking, exaggerating, or confessing something real. She studied his face, the shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders seemed heavy despite his expensive suit. He wasn't lying. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. He leaned back in the booth, giving a faint smile that seemed more like resignation than humor. 1 month, he repeated, as if tasting the words. "And I don't want to spend it locked in hospitals or boardrooms. I want to see the world one last time. But I don't want to do it alone." His eyes fixed on her then, steady and vulnerable. "Will you travel with me?" The question was so sudden, so unbelievable, that Emma almost laughed out of shock. She was just a waitress, working long shifts to pay for her younger brother's tuition and keep the rent up to date. She had no connection to this man, except for serving him coffee a handful of times when he came in late at night. "Why me?" she whispered, half to herself. The man's gaze softened. "Because you look like someone who hasn't been given the chance to live yet. And because you remind me what being alive feels like." Emma's heart pounded. Part of her wanted to refuse, to tell him he was crazy, that she had responsibilities. But another part of her, the part that was tired of the same routine, tired of dreaming about faraway places she could never afford, felt something stir. She had never been asked to be part of someone's last journey. "I don't even know your name," she said, trying to steady her voice. He extended his hand across the table. "Alexander. Alexander Hayes." The name clicked in her mind like a puzzle piece sliding into place. She had read it in magazines, whispered in news stories. A millionaire investor, rumored to own hotels, companies, and even art galleries across Europe. And now he was sitting here in a small corner diner, asking her, a waitress with no savings and a worn pair of sneakers, to travel the world with him. She didn't take his hand right away. Instead, she whispered, "If I say yes, what happens then?" Alexander smiled faintly, as though he hadn't expected her to consider it seriously. "Then we leave tomorrow. Paris, Rome, Tokyo, the Sahara, anywhere you've ever dreamed of. 1 month, no limits. Just you and me, living before the end." Emma's breath caught. She thought of her brother, of bills, of her manager who would never understand. But then she thought of herself. How many times had she stared at travel posters and sighed? How many nights had she wiped down tables wondering if this was all life had to offer her? For the first time, she felt the weight of choice pressing on her heart. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go." Alexander's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked like a man who had been saved from drowning. That night, as the diner closed and Emma walked home through the rain, her mind raced. Was she crazy for agreeing? Was he dangerous? Or was this fate giving her the one chance to live the life she had never dared to chase? The next morning, her world changed. A black car waited outside her apartment, and when she stepped in, Alexander greeted her with coffee and a passport already prepared in her name. "I told you," he said with a small grin. No limits. Their first stop was Paris. From the moment they stood before the Eiffel Tower, Emma's heart soared. She laughed like a child seeing the world for the first time, and Alexander watched her with quiet joy, as if her wonder was the reason he wanted this journey. Over the next weeks, they crossed continents, Venice with gondolas under starlight, the Great Wall of China stretching into forever, the pyramids in Egypt glowing beneath the sun. Emma discovered freedom, laughter, and moments of pure magic she had never imagined. Yet beneath it all was the quiet shadow of truth, Alexander's illness, ticking away the days. She would sometimes catch him staring at the horizon, his hand pressed to his chest, his breath short, and she would pretend not to notice, because she didn't want to break the fragile miracle they were living. But in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them under a sky full of stars, she found herself asking questions. Why her? Why now? And most of all, what would happen when the month was over? By the time they reached Santorini, the questions she had buried began to rise. Emma's heart had changed. She wasn't just traveling with a stranger anymore, she was falling for him. And when Alexander finally took her hand on the edge of the cliff, the sunset painting the sea gold, he whispered, "Emma, thank you for making me feel alive again." Far from crowds and cameras, where the waves kissed the sand and the nights were filled with the sound of crickets. It was there, on their third evening, that Alexander's strength finally faltered. He collapsed on the veranda, his body trembling, his breath ragged, and Emma rushed to him, cradling his head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "Don't leave me," she whispered desperately, but Alexander only smiled weakly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Emma," he said, his voice faint but steady, "don't cry for me. Promise me you'll keep living after I'm gone. Promise me you won't go back to being afraid." She shook her head furiously, gripping his hand as if she could tether him to the world, but deep inside she knew that promises were all she had left to give him. "I promise," she choked out. He kissed her palm with trembling lips, his eyes closing for a moment as if savoring her warmth. The final days were slow and tender. They didn't chase monuments or cities anymore. They simply sat by the ocean, walking hand in hand along the shore, cooking simple meals together, and talking about everything and nothing. Alexander's strength faded, but his spirit seemed brighter, as though love had given him peace. On his last evening, as the sun sank into the horizon painting the sky with streaks of fire and gold, Alexander sat with Emma on the sand. He leaned against her shoulder, his breath shallow, and whispered, "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for giving me life when I thought I had none left." Emma held him close, tears streaming silently down her face as the waves rolled in, carrying the last light of day. And then, with the sound of the ocean surrounding them, Alexander Hayes took his final breath in the arms of the woman who had turned his last month into a lifetime of love. Emma buried him quietly, far from the flashing cameras of the world that once followed him. There were no reporters, no business partners, only her, the man she had loved, and the ocean that had witnessed their final chapter. She stayed by the shore for days, grieving, broken, yet remembering his words, "Promise me you'll keep living." And so she did. Emma returned home not as the same waitress who had once dreamed of travel but as a woman who had lived more in 30 days than many did in a lifetime. She found strength in his memory, courage in his love, and a purpose to live for both of them. Years later, whenever she passed by the diner where it all began, she would pause at the booth by the window, remembering the night he had asked her that impossible question, "Will you travel with me?" And she would smile through the ache, because she had said yes, and in saying yes, she had discovered the meaning of life itself, that love, courage, and the willingness to take a chance could turn even the shortest time into forever. And as she often told others, looking into the camera with a gentle but firm voice, life is too short to wait. If love comes knocking. The morning in Santorini was unlike any other Emma had ever known, the kind where the sea seemed to blend into the sky, where the whitewashed houses clung to the cliffs like secrets too precious to let go. She woke to the sound of seagulls and the warmth of sunlight spilling through the open balcony doors of the villa Alexander had rented for them, her heart still caught between the dream of the night before and the reality of the man sleeping just a few feet away. She turned and saw him, his features softened in rest, but his breathing shallow, the faint rise and fall of his chest reminding her that every day was borrowed time. A wave of fear washed over her, not because she had agreed to go on this journey with him, but because she was beginning to realize that 1 month would never be enough. She wanted more mornings like this, more sunsets on foreign shores, more laughter shared in places where neither of them belonged yet somehow felt at home. But the truth lingered like a shadow. Alexander had confessed that his body was failing, that he had been given 30 days. And now, as Emma watched him, she understood that the days were slipping faster than either of them could hold on to. Their travels continued, each destination more breathtaking than the last, but also heavier with the weight of knowing that the end was drawing near. In Morocco, they rode camels across endless golden dunes, and Alexander laughed until his cough cut him short, forcing Emma to pretend she didn't notice his hand shaking when he held the reins. In Japan, they stood beneath cherry blossoms, petals falling like snow, and Alexander whispered that he wished he had met her sooner, wished he had lived his whole life differently. Emma held back her tears, smiling through the ache, because she wanted his final memories to be filled with beauty, not sorrow. In New York, as they stood at the top of the Empire State Building, the city light sparkling beneath them like a field of stars, Emma found herself gripping his hand tighter, terrified that one day soon she would reach for it and find nothing but air. It wasn't just travel anymore, it was love. Somewhere between the gondolas of Venice and the desert sands of Egypt, Emma had fallen in love with a man who was slipping away, and every moment she tried to push the truth aside, her heart reminded her that the end was inevitable. Yet Alexander seemed at peace. Each night he told her stories of his childhood, of the mistakes he made chasing money instead of meaning, of the loneliness that wealth had never cured. "You've given me more in these weeks," he whispered one night in Rome as they walked by the Colosseum, "than I ever found in all my years of fortune." Emma pressed her forehead against his shoulder, unable to speak, afraid her voice would betray the storm inside her. As the final week arrived, they flew to Hawaii, Alexander insisting he wanted to see the ocean one last time. They rented a small house by the shore.